do you believe that the majority has the right to vote on the civil rights of a minority? Let me repeat that.
I think I can get the gist of the question. I believe this is about the marriage amendment would be my guess, and so I'll give my marriage amendment answer. I believe that by putting this on the ballot, that's exactly what we're doing, is we're asking the majority whether we're going to enshrine discrimination in our Constitution. And I'm personally opposed to that. This is a tough issue for people to wrap their heads around and grapple with and think about. I tell people, I've been married for 20 years myself. My wife is a woman. She's the person that I love. But I look deep in my heart and I ask myself, what does marriage mean to me? And to me, marriage is about love. And it's about commitment. And it's about hard work. It's not easy. And I think anybody who's been married a long time understands that deeply. And those are the core principles that make a marriage. And what makes the ceremony? It's about getting together with your family and your friends and your community and your faith community and taking a vow to live up to that promise of love and commitment and respect for each other and the hard work that it's going to take to get through the hard times. And there will be hard times. Those are the principles that, to me, define what marriage is. And I talk to people all the time, and they say, "Well, I don't want to try to interfere with who people love." I get that. People love, there are same-sex couples that love each other. And once you get that far, I just have to ask, why would we take that love and that desire to commit and take responsibility for each other and deny them the option of marriage?
Thank you. Second on this one, Bill Sommer. Bill, the question is, do you believe that the majority has the right to vote on the civil rights of a minority?
Well, again, I look at that as the marriage amendment, and a lot of the things that we've talked about balancing budget and what's the best way to fund a Viking stadium and stuff like that, Tony and I do agree on some of those things. But this is one area we disagree on. And when we're talking about the majority, the way the question asks it, it makes it sound like they're talking about the majority of the legislature or the majority of the population. I suppose the people voting for it is what they're saying. It's not the majority of the legislature that got the amendment to be on the ballot. So I'm gonna address it as voters. So as the voters, I think it's the best idea if the legislature's at a stalemate, they can't decide on some key critical issue, why not let the voters decide? Whatever side they're on, they can vote. Now, when they say a minority, a lot of times the minority, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, or whatever that saying is. Well, that's what's happening a lot in our society. And I think enough people have finally said, we got to make sure that we're doing good things down at the legislature. The Minnesota Family Institute put out this voters guide. Maybe you guys have seen it. And Tony answered this question like he answered it just now, and about allowing the people to vote on the Minnesota marriage amendment. He thought it was a bad idea. I thought it's a good idea. So I'm voting yes for the marriage amendment. I think it's a good idea because we need to have some consistency. Where I taught last year up at East Central School, the kids coming in there, there's so many problems the way it is, and if we have any more inconsistencies thrown at them, I don't know how it's going to affect our youth down the road. Thank you.
Thank you. Finally, on this question, next on this question, Tim Faust. I'll let you off the hooks. Do you believe that the majority has the right to vote on the civil rights of a minority?
I think this is a much bigger question than the marriage amendment. If you go back in history, there's time and time again that the majority has tried to eliminate the civil rights of a minority. For example, minorities voting in the South. That was, you know, in my lifetime, which hasn't been that long ago, that they were fighting to get those rights to vote. Women's rights to vote are another thing, and that, you know, was before my time. But throughout history, throughout the history of this country, we've always had that struggle between the majority's right to control the minorities, and that's why we have the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is there to rule on cases when the majority has taken the civil rights of the minorities away. And that's why we have the Supreme Court. That's why the Supreme Court makes the rulings that they do. You may not agree with all of their rulings, but they look at the law, and my assumption is that they know more about the law than anybody in this room. And so, you know, that's what they're there for. And so, so I don't, you know, do they have the right to vote on it? I guess they have the right to vote on it, but should they have the right to impose limits on someone else's civil rights? Absolutely not. And like I said, I think this is a much bigger question than the gay marriage amendment. And so and that's, like I said, that's what the Supreme Court is there for when this has been violated, to protect those rights.
Thank you. Last on this round, Ben Weiner. Ben, do you believe that the majority has the right to vote on the civil rights of a minority?
Well, I believe we all have the right to vote on changes to our Constitution. You know, at one time, a minority of people owned slaves, and we voted on the right, we voted to take that right away from slave owners. I think that was a good thing. And I will always trust the people of Minnesota and the voters of Minnesota to do what is right. Now, many times in the history of the state of Minnesota, amendments to the Constitution have come up. Some have failed, some have passed, some have been repealed. But in the long run, the voters of Minnesota will do what's best for Minnesotans. And I have complete faith in the voters of Minnesota to do what's right on both amendments that are before us this election season.